Hello, everyone. I'm Suraj, and my project is about community and well-being at Purdue's Alienware Gaming Lounge. And basically, what I wanted to understand is whether gaming on campus is actually as isolating and terrible as people think, or if spaces like the gaming lounge here at Purdue can really create this new type of social interaction and community among students. And this is something that I'm personally really passionate about, and I really wanted to look into the common stereotype about gaming as well. So, part one, the problem. When most people think about gaming, they don't really picture a social environment. They picture someone sitting alone, maybe dark in a room, playing for hours and hours every day, kind of isolated, not talking to anyone, and constantly ignoring responsibilities. And there's this strong stereotype about gaming that is like gaming leads to isolation, gaming leads to bad grades, and gaming leads to, especially the worst one out of them all, wasted time. And the interesting thing is that even though people don't say this directly, this idea still lingers around society, and it shapes how gamers are really viewed. Um, and honestly, if someone spends a lot of time gaming, they might immediately be judged and be less productive, or less social. And this is the stereotype that I really wanted to go into, and I wanted to confirm whether the stereotype is true or whether it actually is inaccurate. Part two, my research question. So, my main research question is, how does the Alienware Gaming Lounge at Purdue contribute to community building and student well-being? And to give some background, this gaming lounge is in the Corec, which is, I would say, the most used facility in all of Purdue. It's where all the sports are conducted. A lot of students go here for the gym and whatnot, and it is located there. And it is in the basement. So if anyone at Purdue wants to check it out, there's a bunch of details about it online, a bunch of pictures, and I'll also show some images about that too. And to really answer my question, I had to break it down even further. I had to look at things about why students come here instead of gaming at home, and how they truly interact with other people in the lounge. And then the last one is if those interactions are actually lead to meaningful connections and like friendships, or if it's simply just kind of useless. And honestly, you go there, you play games, you waste your time, and then you move on. Because I think that is honestly terrible. So I really wanted to figure out the truth behind this gaming lounge. Now, why this matters. So this goes into my purpose, but before going into this, I want to mention, you might be thinking, why? Like, why even do a project about this? And I want to give some background information about myself and clarify a few things. So, I'm Suraj. I am a game design major here at Purdue, and I do play games quite a bit. Now, truthfully, I will say games are a core part of my life, and I truly feel like I have purpose when I create games, and I see my friends playing the games that I've made, and I feel really happy doing that. So because of this, I have to clarify that there will be bias in this project, but even though there is some bias that I honestly cannot control, I will also, because of the amount of research I've done into this topic, I will go into the negative parts of gaming as well. And, going from the good parts to the bad parts is something that I truly believe in. And I believe that it is important for a project like this to kind of like go over it all. So I will be doing that later on. Now, back to the purpose. So, the purpose here for this project is really to look at student experience here at Purdue. And this matters because spaces on campus really shape student experiences more than we truly realize. Whether it's hanging out with your friends at the Walk, which is another building that a bunch of students go to, and hanging out with them to study, or if it's going to the gym with your friend, like all of these really shape how students feel about the university and how they feel at their time here at college. No one wants to really waste their time going to college not having fun, not enjoying life. You're in your like 20s, it's like your prime years, as a lot of people would say. You need to enjoy your time. Of course, you need to do work as well and really figure out what you want to do in your life. But, you know, these experiences really shape our lives and like, how we feel about ourselves. Now, I've mentioned stuff like the gaming lounge and how the stereotype is there where it almost most people see it as a distraction. Now, something similar, like another place that are is another campus space is like a library or a study room. Places like the Walk, like I just mentioned, right? And you see these places as productive. So that being said, I wanted to really like compare the two, and see if some place like the gaming lounge, even though it's like considered as a fun distraction, if it can actually be beneficial, if it can be beneficial specifically socially and mentally for a student. Okay. Now, college can usually be stressful and sometimes isolating. So if a place like the gaming lounge exists where it helps people relax and connect with others, then I actually think that's really good for people and it's really important for student well-being. So um that being said, this is all like a type of theory and I'm going to go into this later, but it's basically like how I see the gaming lounge, and this that's kind of like it's like my first impression of it because I've been playing games for so long, because I've been to these spaces before. But I know that I'm different from most others, so it's good to keep an open mind and compare all sides, see the entire perspective of everything related. So this goes into my research findings. So when I actually, I've been doing a lot of research about this for a while now, and it's just because gaming is a core part of my life, I needed to know all the downsides and how to avoid it, right? And also all the good parts. So kind of acknowledging everything, like I mentioned before. And this means doing a bunch of research. So if we go into my research findings, something that I truly believe in is that because of these studies, there's a bunch of studies that show that gaming can actually improve teamwork, communication, and even decision-making skills. Now, this happens specifically, and I might mispronounce her name, but in one of my sources, it is a TED Talk, and it is about this researcher and neuroscientist called Balavier, and she basically states that especially in multiplayer environments where people have to coordinate each other, that's where you're actually you're refining your skills, your decision making skills, and your communication. They really develop when in these multiplayer games. So this being said, I believe that this one of the strengths to gaming is social connection and teamwork. Now, a big thing, a very big thing, and this goes into the negative aspects of gaming. And it is basically you get this opportunity to have this sort of stress relief. You've had a tough exam, and then after that, you play games, you relax a bit, you have some fun. But the biggest thing that all these studies mention is that you have to do it in moderation. Now, I also believe this, that if you game too much, it's actually really harmful. And that's where the bad, like negative, like stereotypes come from, is because there's a lot of people who honestly game too much. And that's where the issue relies in. Now, if you have a balance, that's when everything, is in your life is more successful and you're more happy. But if you're gaming too much, you are wasting time. You are, like this says, your biggest weakness is addiction. You're gonna be addicted. Every time you lose a game, you're gonna be like, I want to play more and more and more and try to, win more. And that is not healthy at all. And that's the biggest negative aspect, is that some people really fall into a trap. And I think that's really sad. And you need to be really thinking about what you're doing, Am I gaming for fun and relaxing after I've worked all day and had, a tough day and I'm using this as a stress relief, or am I just gaming the game? Just have fun constantly. I'm avoiding, my responsibilities. All of that is awful. You don't want to do that. Okay. And this is all part of my theory. So this is the next part. And of course, when you have like a project like this, you want to have some ideas beforehand. It's like when you do anything scientific related, it's like the hypothesis kind of, right? So instead of having a specific hypothesis though, I had basically my first impressions and my ideas that have just come from, like my past and like talking to a bunch of people. And yeah, so, and specifically, I wanted to go into social norms. So, social norms are basically shared beliefs about what's considered normal or acceptable. We've talked a lot about like stuff like this in class. I've also had a previous class discuss about social norms and how people like conceive like gender and like how they really think about um, you know, topics like that. And sometimes it's kind of sensitive and it can go either way. But really discussing the idea of a lot of people have common social norms, right? And then when you have a lot of people having common social norms, then that's going to shape more opinions about newer people having kind of like the same norm. And that's kind of how gaming has always had this negative stigma, right? And of course, like I said, it needs to be in moderation. And I'm going to keep bringing that up. I truly believe that if it isn't in moderation, well, it's just awful. Like if you're doing it so much, it is truly awful. And I've experienced this, so I have some personal, opinions about this. And because I've experienced it, I can tell that, like I can agree with that detail. Now, another thing is that I wanted to like compare. So I've mentioned this earlier, but it's kind of this idea of third places. So like a cafe where you hang out with your friends, you can compare that to the gaming lounge. I believe this, that you can compare that to like a gaming lounge where you hang out and talk to your friends and play games with your friends. It's very similar. And yes, there is this idea of more digital. And truthfully, I think everyone knows this, that we are moving into a more digital world and like, more relying on electronics. Now, too much electronics, exactly like my point again, bad. But having that moderation, it is good. And the last thing is this gaming equals to social capital idea. So it's basically how gaming we can use the gaming lounge as a way to talk to others, to meet new people, and there is some sort of social interaction. Now, I've personally like had this where I've met people at Purdue online. They go to Purdue, but we've met through the game, right? They like playing the game. I like playing the game. We played a couple games together. I had a fun time, and eventually, I actually met these people, and we've gone out a bunch, right? So it kind of went from this virtual friendship of us being in the same university, but never meeting in person to constantly meeting in person. And I think that's honestly really interesting and kind of I've also this happened when I was at the gaming lounge. So I did not have a computer, so I played here, and that's how I met, my current friend group. Now, something to keep in mind is I no longer play at the gaming lounge. That was only for one semester. And for my project itself, I really wanted to go to the gaming lounge again and just meet the people who currently play, because it has been a while since I've been there, and meet the people and kind of ask them some questions. So this goes into my next section, which is the interview data that I pulled. So, the four main questions that I asked them is why do you come to the gaming lounge? And this is my motivation for visiting question. And you can see how there's four categories here, and each of them go relate to the question. So each of these, like Ethan, Ava, all these people, are responding to the top questions for that category. So the next question is, do you interact with new people here or mostly stick with friends? And then the next one is, does gaming here help with stress or affect your mood? And the last one is, do you think gaming has a negative reputation? Now, these are the four main questions. I did ask others, but the other questions didn't get, the juicy details. Like there's more vague like responses that I personally think like it might have been just the interviewee, the people I interviewed, they kind of didn't understand the question or didn't like the question. So they didn't really feel like answering that well. Now, that being said, like this, when I did conduct this interview, it was during an event at the gaming lounge. So there was a reservation at the gaming lounge for an event, and a bunch of people came. And I'm gonna have pictures of these people coming in later on other slides, but you're gonna notice that you know, these responses are kind of valid and they make a lot of sense. So I'm just going to go through a couple of them and we can see here. So, motivation for visiting. So, Ethan said, I come here because it's fun and I get to play with my friends in person instead of online. And then he later went into this idea of, he likes the online interaction because he's just kind of introverted and he doesn't really like um you know talking to a whole bunch of people. Now, sorry, oh my God, uh, this is how he used to be. I need to clarify, I forgot to mention that. Now, ever since he did get to meet them, he's completely changed as a person. Now, he constantly visits them, and I actually know Ethan personally. He's one of my friends, and I've heard when we get into like a call and I call him sometimes, I can hear him at my other friends' dorm. So it's actually quite interesting how a person can change over time, and how the gaming lounge has honestly kind of shaped his personality to instead of being scared, trying to like put yourself out there a little more. So that's Ethan. And now another thing that I wanted to look at, and it's Lily here. So stereotypes and balance. So it's a stereotype question. And the question is, do you think gaming has a negative reputation? And she said, I make sure to finish my work first. But yeah, it's sometimes easy to lose track of time. And she later went into this is why she thinks that some people get easily distracted and why gaming has this idea and this concept of it's a distraction trying to pull you away from reality. Now, this has some positives and some negatives. You are, kind of pulling yourself away from reality, but it's also like kind of an escape to all the stress and all the harsh and pain you've maybe been through. Maybe you had a tough exam, you know, you've and like you studied really hard, you did well, it was tough, now you got to relax a bit. And that's kind of like this idea. But as long as you're doing what Lily does, which is being on top of it, constantly doing your work, having your priorities straight, gaming should never be priority one. It should be one of your last priorities after you've kind of done everything you need to do in your life. And this is really important. You need to have that sort of balance, which is why I added stereotypes and balance as the category. Now, this goes to my next one, my findings. So we've talked about the interview data, and now I will go into the findings of what the most noticeable things were that we can like really deduce from my project. So what I observed is what one of the most noticeable things was how much communication was happening. People weren't just sitting silently. They were constantly, whether it was giving instructions during a game or reacting to something funny, they were having casual conversations. And this constantly is a thing. Now, like no matter who it was, there's no one really like just like kind of playing alone, doing their own thing. Now, I do think that if you do play alone, it's honestly not good because you're kind of like pulling yourself away from society and everything and reality. And I don't know. I feel like people don't usually prefer playing alone most of the time. There are like, there are some people who like playing alone, but I think there's more people who like playing with others, and that's important. Now, another thing that I should mention is I also noticed that even strangers would start interacting just because they were playing the same game or sitting near each other. And this kind of goes back to me and my friend Josh, who I met. And like I met him because he also doesn't have a computer, so he has to come to. This was during freshman year. He doesn't have a computer, so he needs to come to the gaming lounge. And I met him by, I just saw him playing the game. He was pretty good at it. And I was like, I asked him to play, and that's how we met. And it honestly was really fun. And this interaction doesn't really match the stereotype of gaming being isolating. And you know what does is when you play alone, which is why I would not recommend that. Now, why students come? So this kind of leads into the interview data, and it's kind of like I kind of made sections to kind of break it down, if that makes sense. Now, when I looked at why people come to lounge, there wasn't one like specific answer, but it's some people come because they enjoy the competitive aspect and want to improve their skills. So they really like grinding the games, getting like better and better and like ranking up. And then others come because their friends are there. So it's like more of like a social activity where you're laughing with your friends. And some people also mentioned that it's kind of like a break from school. There I have a lot of engineering friends who like they take these like tough exams and their classes are really hard. And they've studied a bunch during the day and they kind of just want to chill, right? So that's why they do it. And that's valid because they put in the effort to kind of like, you know, they put in the hard work. So now they just want to relax a bit. So another thing like I like to mention is that based off these interview data and you know me talking to a bunch of people, I do believe that the gaming Alienware gaming lounge here at Purdue serves multiple purposes, and that's to specifically relax, compete, and socialize. Going to socialization now is this is another thing. So, of course, we've mentioned the casual like conversations, but going deeper into that is like how like this is one of the biggest patterns that I saw, right? And one of the games is like it's a multiplayer game. So they're talking to their like friends and they're really like trying to communicate and trying to like work together. And it was honestly kind of cool where you have these people like communicating and like either like positions where the enemy's at or like what the team needs to do to win. They're working really hard and like trying their best to win. And this is a picture of our gaming lounge, by the way. These are a bunch of people that came up to see, and there you can see the PCs in the picture and like the whole room and like people like wandering around. And you know, going back to the conversations is you can really see the type of social interaction going on. You can see the people like sometimes what I saw was people joking, right? Talking to each other, and sometimes really trying really hard and working together, communicating on what the team needs to do within the game to win. And all of this, I truly believe, leads to you making friends and like meeting new people. And, it's like there's a lot of people who kind of just feel alone that like they don't like they need to find their people. And I think gaming is like a method for you to find some of your friends that you can interact with. Like some people don't want to have just like study friends, like people from your classes, and that's good. You should have friends from your classes, but you also should have friends where you can just talk to whenever you want and like, you can just like hang out with whenever you want. And you can find these from classes, but you can also find this through this gaming lounge. Now, mental health and well-being. So I really believe that like a big part of this project is like the well-being of students. And, you know, a lot of students can like they describe the gaming lounge as honestly, like if I were to like rephrase it, they described it as like their mental reset area. And, after long classes or exams, coming here like helps them relax. So this being said, it's kind of like a break from academic pressure, but like you're honestly with your friends in the social setting. And I think that that combination of relaxation and social interaction can really be beneficial. Okay. The next part is negative aspects. So this is I also already mentioned this, but excessive gaming is terrible. Don't do it. It's all awful. And you need to have good time management like Lily, doing your work first before you game. You don't want to just constantly game and do no work. That's the exact opposite. That's how you lead the stereotype actually becomes true. You would basically be wasting your life, wasting your time. And having that balance is super important. Now, these are my final arguments, and it is that the gaming lounge is not just a place to play games. It functions as a social environment where students can interact, build friendships, and feel like a part of a community. And I do truly believe it does challenge the stereotypes that gaming is always isolating. Now, also, so that was for the gaming lounge. Now, for gaming itself, I do not believe that gaming is inherently bad. And I think that what really matters is like the context. So, are you gaming a lot? Are you like gaming a little bit? Are you gaming moderately? And like I keep saying this, moderation is key. If you don't have moderation, well, my all my points made in this kind of doesn't stand. And you can become isolating. You can become honestly just like alone. If you're gaming alone a lot, kind of avoiding society, that's honestly terrible. Now, my final reflection is again, gaming isn't bad. And oh, a little bit of a typo, but gaming isn't bad. And also, the environment truly matters. So, going more into this, that, you know, you don't want to have like you don't want to have gaming a lot alone in anywhere, right? So when you're out at a cafe, honestly, like going to a cafe alone, sitting there, kind of like just drinking your drink and just like honestly just like watching YouTube is honestly, I would say, not that good. I think personally that, instead of that, you should be going out with your friends, talking to them, still drinking your drink. But a lot of people nowadays, they're just watching YouTube or scrolling while they're eating alone. And I just don't like that. I think that you have these spaces within campus where you can talk to other people and you should be. And the gaming is similar, like to the cafe. You don't want to like doing it alone is okay, right? You can always do it alone, but it's truly good and much better if you're talking to other people. And I truly believe that like happiness comes from like, interacting with other people, and you can make deep friendships just by interacting and talking to them constantly. So, like that being said, you have to do it like more and more in your life. And you know, have has my original like thoughts about gaming itself changed? I wouldn't say it has changed exactly, but I think I've gotten more details about why people do the things they do regarding gaming and why they come to places like the gaming lounge. And, you know, I think that like you can do whatever you want within your life, but really like figuring out what you want and like having the balance of working really hard for your career and then also relaxing and playing games is super important. And one of my roommates, he does this. He's a super hard worker. He wakes up early in the morning, goes to his classes, then he does a bunch of work. And he's doing aerospace engineering, which I believe is like super, super like complex and very, very in high standard here at Purdue. And he always at the end of the day he plays an hour of games just to relax, and he's constantly talking to his friends, and I'm honestly happy for him. He's found the balance to having a happy life, and that's what I truly want for all students here at Purdue, whether they game or not, to just be happy and have fun at their time here. And this is my works cited. So, and this is my annotated bibliography for, my abstract and the references. And yeah, thank you.